I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you're going to love that title story too. Here's our first one. Dealing with nightmare new neighbors, writing them a note before escalating. My girlfriend and I live on the top floor of an apartment complex. We're both introverted homebodies. Generally, it's quiet. However, we had new neighbors move into the unit next to us last week who have brought nothing but pain. It seems to be a family of 3, a man, woman, and child, who have lots of friends. Every single day, the mariachi and reggaeton starts in the morning and continues to midnight, increasing in obnoxiousness as they drink more. That incessant bass line just shakes the walls and comes in at 70 dB, measured in our unit via an iPhone app. The kid screams all day and night, seemingly without any kind of intervention. On New Year's Eve, we saw someone carrying 10 plus folding chairs into their unit, and these people had a party that started at about 7 p.m. and carried on until 6:30 a.m. the next morning. Not exaggerating. Up until about 1 a.m., I wanted to give them a pass. I mean, it is a holiday after all. However, as the night went on, the music continued and they had kids screaming at the top of their lungs, running up and down the shared hallway. Again, with seemingly no adult intervention. As the kids clearly got more and more drunk, they started spilling out into the hallway too. The carpet is now stained with what I'm guessing is beer and garbage water and has food ground into it. Yesterday, the music started again around noon and went on until sometime past midnight. It is inescapable throughout the entirety of our unit, and we have to hear this garbage for hours, even after we go to bed in our room on the complete opposite side of the apartment with the door closed. I cannot stand the way that these people behave. I have lived in apartments for about 20 years, and these people are by far the worst that I have ever had the misfortune of living next to. I could just never imagine being so blatantly inconsiderate and disrespectful. I'm asking for a sanity check from you. Is the note that I've drafted below appropriate? I've been told more than once that I can be too blunt. If it doesn't give me the results, which I don't believe it will, this is mostly just to say I tried. What should I do? Tell the landlord? File the police noise complaint? I just don't even have high hopes that either of them will do anything about it. And the letter is, "Hello. We aren't sure if you're aware, and we are not trying to be rude, but the noise coming from your unit at all hours of the day and night is very disruptive to your neighbors. In addition to the screaming and the loud conversations, the bass, which carries easily, shakes the walls, and we are able to hear it clearly throughout the entirety of our unit, including in our bed when we are trying to sleep during quiet hours. As your lease states, there are designated quiet hours between this and that time in night and morning, which we should not be able to hear you during those. Currently, our right to quiet enjoyment is being infringed, and we ask politely that you remedy this issue by turning your music down. We don't expect people to sneak around their own units, and we are understanding that you have a child and kids make noise. However, having parties like you did on New Year's Eve with loud music until 6:30 a.m., children screaming and running through the hallway, seemingly without adult intervention, is completely inconsiderate and rude. Please be considerate and remember that other people occupy the units around you." Signed, your neighbors. I've also been recording the noise with timestamps as well as taking screenshots of the decibel meter. Imagine what the people below them are going through. I can't even imagine. And OP says, "I know, I truly feel bad for them. If their downstairs neighbors have the demeanor a lot of people here do, they just won't say anything or want to be involved. Unfortunately, I think this one is up to me." Yeah, I mean, they're breaking rules left and right. I'd be talking to my landlord yesterday because you have the proof of it, which they won't like if you record it, but still the fact of the matter is, they're breaking the rules, they're disturbing everyone around them for literally almost 24 hours. OP, take them on down, but be careful when you do it because they sound wild. HOA horror story time. During COVID, I moved into a small, maybe 30 home, lakefront subdivision in Texas with a fairly inactive HOA, primarily run by retired homeowners. Of course, 18 months in, a large tree fell on my home and caused significant roof damage. Being a novice homeowner, I wasn't aware that cement tile roofs are quite expensive to replace and to obtain 100% replacement cost, and I've been battling with the insurance company for 16 months and one over-promising roofer through appeals, and now finally, the last piece, an appraisal. I am in a bad position because there is a $100,000 difference between the contractor and the insurance, but that's another story for another day. Now, the HOA has sent me 2 letters, the first with 3 issues. First, a political sign, and then roof repairs not being made by 6 months after the tree fall, and also our septic connected sprinklers smelling. They threatened to report me to the TECQ. Rather than argue with them over the legality of the sign, by the way, the no sign policy has an unwritten exception for church signs, I removed it. I fired our septic maintenance person, who was the same one the HOA president next door uses, and hired a new one and had the tank pumped. I have 0 experience with septic and the connected sprinklers. Also, I've noticed other neighbors' sprinklers stinking from time to time. Fast forward several months later, and unfortunately, the insurance issue is still slow going. Last week, I received a letter that they would start fining me $50 a month for both lots that I own, even the one the house is not on, beginning in March 2024. That is fine with me. I suspect the repairs will be done by then. But then my dad came across the HOA president in my yard yesterday with another individual, and they said unspecified neighbors complained about a mold smell and they were testing. Dad was nice to them, said let us know, and left it at that. But I'm livid. So first off, I do have allergies, but I smell nothing. Do they have a right to just come into my yard? I suspect the complaint is the HOA, tiring of looking at my tarps, which are quite ugly. At the end of the day, I have an open insurance claim, and I don't have a spare $100,000, $200K total, to replace this ridiculous cement tile roof. I admit that I've made mistakes along the way with the insurance selection, the roofer selection, and maybe buying this home in the first place. I have loved lakeside living. I'm 2 doors down from my sister, which has been lovely. When asked if this was the first time in the HOA, the reply, I lived in one for a few years as a renter, but it was a fairly new townhome and I didn't have to do anything. The HOA did the outside landscaping for the teeny tiny bit of green space in the front. First time as a homeowner and not a fan. I mean, imagine how you'd feel if you came home from work or something one day and you go in your yard and the president and some dude is standing there. I'd be ticked off this is my yard. I want to come home and expect that you're not going to be standing in it measuring for stuff without asking me first. Wow, this is really bad. What would have you done? As we get into the next story, I have to tell you something. Hey, also, I added more stories to the new 24/7 HOA Karen radio stream on the channel, perfect to binge or play for background noise while you sleep. Check out the link in the description or on the front page of the channel. It looks like this. This is a story of the worst HOA neighbor ever. What would you do? I live in Washington, USA, and I moved into my condo about 2.5 years ago. After a few months of moving in, the person who lives below me came up to my apartment and started blasting at my parents, who opened the door and were visiting and don't even speak English. He was shouting about a noise issue. I talked to him nicely about it. Now, I didn't know about it, but the chairs in my dining area, when moved, used to cause a noise for the level below. This was when I was new, so I didn't know about it until he told me, or rather shouted at me. I made sure that the chair noise never happened again, because, of course, if it's under my control, and if I'm doing something, I want to be helpful and not cause trouble. But the interaction was not pleasant. I didn't say anything, considering there was an issue on my side, and I was understanding about it. He could have been nice and explained what was happening, but he chose not to, and this was the first ever interaction with this old gentleman who lives below me. Cut to 8 months later, around 10 p.m., I was working with my headphones on while he kept bashing on my front door. I was working and I was deep into a coding issue at that point that I was just trying to debug. It took me a few minutes to realize that someone's at my front door because I also had my noise-canceling headphones on. I was scared at first, but opened the door and he just shouts at me saying, "Stop whatever you're doing, it's getting noisy." Well, I explained to him very nicely that I am working and not doing anything. And he keeps on not believing and saying that I just need to stop being really unreasonable. 2 minutes into this, we hear a noise. It's coming from, I don't know, maybe upstairs or from the apartment next door. Not sure, don't really care. But then he says, "Hear that? That's the noise," while I'm standing in front of him on my front door, because the noise is coming from somewhere else, and he says it's that, so right there, I was not doing anything. I live alone, I don't have pets, and my girlfriend lives in a different city right now for her job. At this point, I gave him my number and told him that next time it happens, feel free to shoot me a message, and then we can figure out what's happening together. I tried to be helpful in the situation. Well, the other thing is that I travel so much that I'm not home 50% of the time, so my intention was either, hey, we can figure out where it's coming from, or if I'm doing it, I'll see what I'm doing at that point when he hears the noise, and I'll be more mindful of that specific thing and not cause any issue. So a few days after I gave him the number, he messaged me in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., to ask my pet to be controlled. I don't have a pet and no one else living in my apartment, and no one else was visiting. I was already asleep for more than an hour when I got that message. This, again, was not a message asking if I'm doing something and if I can stop and be more mindful. This was again straight up putting the blame on me without even knowing the situation. So I tried being helpful, but that didn't seem to work. Cut to tonight. He comes while I just got back from a day trip and tells me that I need to stop dropping stuff and that I was also making noise last night. And when I tell him that I just got back and that I was out last night till 2 a.m., I was out yesterday from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m., and he's not ready to believe. He's like, "Your girlfriend might be here," who was visiting and he saw her, and I have just said that it might be my girlfriend and I'll let her know if she was home, but we were both out together, which he is not ready to believe again. And then he says, well, there was also someone smoking. Now, what am I supposed to do about any smoke that he is getting from wherever the heck? I've been very respectful to him, considering that he is an elder person, but he has not been okay. In all these incidents, which were 6 to 8 months apart, even if there was a noise from my side, the dude could have just been nice and told me that there's something that I'd be mindful of, but he's just not been nice about it. Now, the concerning part is that in one of these interactions, he mentioned that if I would like to hear from his lawyer, and I don't want to get into any legal trouble, I own the house, but I'm still on a visa in the country and don't want to be caught up in this useless issue. I want to inform the HOA about it, but I also don't want them to say anything to him to agitate him. Do you agree about calling the police next time he knocks? What about not being a pushover, this says, and stop engaging with him? He's unhinged. Yeah, call the cops, get cameras, do something, because this guy clearly can't take no for an answer, and I'd be uncomfortable living beside him. I honestly would. I mean, if you've ever had a bad neighbor, you know what I'm talking about. The good ones, they're so good, do not take them for granted. What would have you done? Neighbor complained to the HOA about my yard. So, I have a Karen for a neighbor. She's a grumpy old C with a live-in son in his 40s and no other family or friends. And when I say she's a Karen, we're talking to the point that she came into my property to yell at our landscaper about a boulder he was installing on our property. Something about believing it would fall over onto more of our property. A few months after we moved in, we received a letter from the HOA saying that they'd received complaints and asking that we make sure that we're mowing, watering, and maintaining. I chalked it up into moving into a nicer neighborhood and made an effort to mow twice a week instead of my normal once. Added a little time to the sprinklers and, well, figured it was all good. Apparently, it was not all good, as we received another letter stating that the complaints had continued and the HOA wanted to talk with us to see what the problem was. Now, I should note, we had just moved in not that long ago and hadn't landscaped the back yet, so we were letting our dogs pee on the front at night, which led to the inevitable patches of bright green grass that grow stupid fast. Now, I'll freely admit that I don't keep my yard to the level of some of my neighbors, but it was in perfectly good shape outside of some green spots in an otherwise average-looking yard, and I do my best to keep things mowed and looking decent. Turns out our grumpy C had taken real offense to this and started complaining to the HOA. The hearing ended up being mostly incoherent rambling, but the bottom line was, she didn't like how our lawn looked with the green spots. While the HOA agreed this was not her business and definitely not theirs, I decided that she was right and we should stop letting our dogs out in the front to pee, as I also don't like the green spots. Now I put them on the leash and let them do their business in her yard, read tree lawn, and I'm clearly not the only one, as her entire yard is now covered in pea spots and dead spots on her actual lawn, which my dogs don't step on. I'm pretty sure she's complained about everyone with a dog, and now the entire neighborhood takes their dogs to her yard. The best part, she actually does a crappy job taking care of her lawn, weeds and crabgrass everywhere, and she just waters it almost non-stop. So today, I got to report her to the HOA for her yard looking like total crap. If it were any other house, there are much worse, I wouldn't care at all, but this lady wanted lawns without spots, so I'm just doing my part to enforce her rules. And to everyone hating on HOAs, they're hit and miss for sure, but in this case, they didn't do anything but tell me that someone complained, and then tell her that I wasn't violating any rules and that they weren't going to be involved. Also, HOAs are often surprisingly easy to take over. You just have to skip the whining about how terrible they are and do the work instead. If the HOA is that bad, talk to some neighbors, tell them you're going to run for the board, and get them to vote for you, and then help others to do the same. And remember what you hated about the previous board. Be forewarned, everyone finds a reason to complain, and no one's willing to help out. For everyone about the green grass from dog pee, urea to ammonium to nitrogen for plants. If you don't water it, it stays concentrated in one area, killing the grass. If you do water it, or just spray the spot with the hose quickly, it's diluted and gives the grass a big boost of organic nitrogen fertilizer. We've had ongoing issues with our HOA, and the latest is that they have sent us a warning about having an RV, a very nice, expensive RV, parked on a short street across from our driveway. Some friends came through for a couple of days on their way from Alaska to Kentucky and took a break at our home. We received a warning from the HOA accusing our friends of camping in their RV. They stayed inside our home in the guest bedroom, but they made a point of saying that there was evidence of camping and that we were in trouble over it. The interesting thing to me is that there is construction next door to our home that's been going on for over 2 years, and the builder, who will eventually live in the home, parked junk trailers, inoperable vehicles, and stored trailers belonging to subs while they weren't working on the property. They dumped trash on our property, and at one point dumped a full-size deli and meat cooler on our property. The rules clearly state that residents aren't allowed to park trailers, boats, inoperable vehicles, and such on their lots. I did not know this before our friends arrived, so yes, I'm in the wrong, but I'm pretty ticked off that they've allowed this contractor to make our really nice neighborhood of expensive houses look like crap for 2 years. Whenever I complained to the HOA, they told me they're not in the enforcement business and that it's different because he's a builder and the HOA rules don't apply, even though he will live in the home for 2 years to avoid capital gains. Their other recent attack, I'll call it that, is that one night we went out to grab a bite and the HOA's compliance officer called me and threatened to call the sheriff and animal control because our dogs were barking inside our home. We had accidentally left the windows open, and that was an honest mistake because we always close them. We live in the mountains and there's wildlife. Around that time, a fox was coming onto our back patio, attracted to our home because of food trash left out by subcontractors that would blow into our backyard. Our dogs barked, and once I realized that compliance officer was the same woman who'd ignored my complaints about construction trash, and then I asked her how she could threaten me while ignoring my complaints, she replied, "We're not in the enforcement business." I guess she didn't see the irony. They are also harassing us for things that they are not enforcing with other residents, like dogs barking constantly, loud karaoke, and parties until all hours of the night. I have been treated like crap by this HOA. When we bought our home 2 years ago, our home came with plans for a second floor, and I'm also afraid that since they think I'm a nuisance, that they won't approve our permit to build that was previously approved by them. Can they do that? What would you do if you lived in this terrible HOA? This is bad, man. If you're going to apply the rules to one, you gotta apply them to everybody. What would you do? Ask to remove the camera and solar flame light on the structure of a home that's been there for 2 years. Curious of what you would do. Do I just remove what they asked and place it in another area inside the home without saying a word? Or do I remove it, place it inside the home, and then send them an email back saying what you asked to remove has been done? However, please note that whatever neighbor complained about this obviously thought it was there for the wrong intention, and it was not. I am not using it to watch or spy on neighbors. It's there for security purposes because, and then tell them why, I guess the association feels my safety isn't a concern, and so on. Generally speaking, I've had almost no issues with the association the last 15 years that I've been here. I cause no problems and mean no harm to anyone. Here's what went down. I got an email yesterday from my HOA that basically said I had to remove a security camera and a solar light on the outside of my home. It's a 1.2 watt solar flame light and not a floodlight. And I have a ton of decorations out for Halloween, and I usually decorate for the holidays. These pieces they want removed have been there for 2 years now, no problems. My camera is pointed to a walking path that is right next to my porch, with a few other townhouses in the background in the distance. I've had some issues with strangers coming around in the evening, jumping on my patio after 10 p.m., knocking on my door and ringing the doorbell and running. Hence the camera, since I get concerned someone may take something or try to rob me. It is not a Ring doorbell, but is a Blink camera. It's not an eyesore. I wanted some security and some lighting there because it was dark. So I asked them to send me some rules and regulations so I can see them, and they sent me this gem from 2008, right when I moved into the townhouse. According to them, no floodlights or any other electrical or mechanical devices may be installed to or installed to any portion of the common and limited elements at any time, except as may be provided below. So I still don't know what the below is, as it's not in the document, but it is the reason for it because we are preserving the economic and aesthetic value of our community. Also, they threatened to charge me $25 per day if I don't remove them. They sent me a picture of the specific camera and the light in question. I have others there too, so I'm surprised they didn't take pictures of those. First off, I think the rule is BS. My safety is more important than the aesthetic of the outside of the home. Because I know this is a fight that I won't win, I'll be seeking alternative methods of security that are not against the rules and regulations. Secondly, what possesses an association to come around and check on these things? This couldn't be a random check, could it? Should I suspect a neighbor complained of something, maybe my over-the-top amazing decorations, so they came around to check it out and got me on something else instead? Actually, I'm almost more certain now that a certain neighbor complained because her and her daughter have been walking around my home for years now. Their home is not visible to me or my camera. They just walk the path. I caught them the past 2 days looking directly at my camera, and they even said, "Is that a spy camera?" when looking at it. Apparently, that's new to them despite being there for the last 2 years in plain sight. My neighbor saw the lady a couple of weeks ago creeping around my home and told her that she was from the association and she was just there to admire my Halloween decorations. She lied. Now I do have a partial physical disability, so safety is even more of a concern for me over aesthetics. More info. Move the camera inside. That's how my security cameras are installed. That way nobody knows they're there. I'm not in an HOA, that's just my choice. That's pretty much what I'll be doing. Oh, and instead of leaving dimmer flame lights out on the structure, I'll get highly bright solar lights staked to the ground for the walkway in front of my home. I'm not ruining anything with that one. When the HOA Karen messes with your safety and you have a disability, how would you handle it? HOA Karen put a lien on my house, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you find out what happens to that HOA, and I'll see you there.